Today on the KeithAndrewNetwork, we have two upcoming professional comedians, Charlie Spinks and Joe Gorman. What a great episode we did. Make sure to like and subscribe to the KeithAndrewNetwork. And as I always say, I'll catch you later. The whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities or disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. It's prove to them you can still amount to something. So hashtag break the labels. That being said, first question I want to ask you starting off our show is, who do you admire besides me? But seriously, who do you admire and why?
Well, there's a lot of people. I admire my stepfather, who I think was pivotal when I was growing up in terms of developing a sense of humor and being yourself. In terms of comedy, I would say Conan O'Brien. I like how transcendental his humor is and how he's just able to relate to so many people, to stay funny and engaging without being hurtful, but just being kind of just positive and nice and friendly.
No, I agree. I'm sorry. I've been talking all day.
Oh, that's all right. No problem at all, man. Take your time.
But for answering one of your questions, well, actually, let me ask you this one first.
Mhm.
Do you keep it rated PG or do you keep it in between? Like, I'm going to be spontaneous.
I usually keep it around like PG-13, I would say, but I do adjust it for the audience. I would say like at for the most part, it's fairly like PG-13. There's nothing out there that's too outrageous. Like I think the most outrageous things are a little more tongue in cheek. So there's a pass there. But like, we can always adjust. Like if it's a more mature audience, I can do a little more rated R stuff. And if it's a younger, more sensitive audience, you can always adjust to make stuff a little more PG or even G if needed.
I agree.
Diversify. Yeah.
Like for my show, I keep it like PG-13. The highest is like TB-14. So I don't want it to water it down like, oh, it's a whooshy show or anything. I like the aspect of freedom of speech and self-expression. So you get to actually express how you feel and how you want to express yourself, but at the same time, at least be professional about it. So it's good to have that middle ground. Like, yes, we can be cutting edge and edgy and uncensored, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you want to be respectful.
Right. It's the audience that pays for the ticket, and you want to make sure they get their money's worth and that they want to encourage people to come. I mean, there's some comics that don't need that. They already have enough of a following that they say like, no, my audience knows what they're getting at this point. But until you're at that level, you got to learn how to do a little bit of everything.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of, it's funny you should mention that. The next question I want to ask you is, what can you tell us about your audience? Like, who exactly do you cater to?
I would say it's mostly like young people in the more metropolitan areas. I would say like my demographic is like young people in the city, ages 20 to 30.
For me, a lot of people have this misconception that, because my show is about disabilities, it's kind of like I only cater to one side of the audience. It's kind of like, yes, let me rephrase that. When I say I cater to people with disabilities, it's just saying I have a learning disability and I'm showing you, look at what I'm able to accomplish. Now, by any chance, if someone on the show has a disability, they're more than welcome too. But just saying, oh, my audience is black and white, and it's only about this section or this genre or demographic. It's not like that, because I cater to every single person out there. But the next one I want to ask is my good friend Charlie. Thank you for
Hey,
joining us. And I see you don't have the background, but whatever. I do like the one you have. But the first question I want to ask you, as I asked Joe, is who do you admire and why?
Well, I would say that from a professional level, I admire the all-time greats, the people that I claim to have opened for but never have, Mark Twain, Richard Pryor. Anytime I'm filling out a resume or just a comedy compilation sheet, I claim I've opened for those guys. I haven't, but I'm a really big fan of the classic comedy format. People who can work clean, great gentlemen like Bill Cosby, who have never done anything wrong in their lives and just are always a perfect shining example for all. And on a more personal level, my appearance. I'm a big fan of my dad. Want to grow up and be just like him someday.
No, absolutely. It's absolutely important to have a positive role model in your life. No, actually, it's funny to mention that because we're talking off the air about your son. But do you think you're obviously got sound like an oxymoron? Obviously, your son uses you for an inspiration and a role model.
Oh, exactly. He's going to need somebody to make fun of. I mean, I kind of built most of my early material making fun of my dad. And I hope I can provide that same inspiration for my son, that I can be goofier and warm-hearted and even more well-meaning than my old man, but he sets that bar pretty high.
It's true. You know, the next thing I want to ask you guys is some of the great comedians out there, Robin Williams, George Carlin. He's a better actor than comedian. Dennis Leary, Eddie Murphy. I actually came across some on, I think it's like the 60s or 70s by Tom Conway. He's really funny. Lucy Ball, take her or leave her. But there's so many great people, especially in professional wrestling. I'm a huge wrestling fan. You had Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Mhm.
You had Mean Gene Okerlund, Gorman Monsoon, Paul Heyman, who's a great talker. So you have so many great personalities. So the question I want to ask both of you, and Joe, I'm going to ask you this one, is, as I mentioned, there's so many great personalities in the world. Do you try to mirror any of them and try to make them into your work? And that's a question for both of you.
Yeah. I think like that's really more of a thing that happens like when you first start doing comedy, is you're more like your inspiration. I guess like when I started, it would have been Patton Oswalt at the time. And I would consider my style of comedy vastly different from Patton Oswalt now. Now it's weird because like people are keep coming up to me after shows and they'll say like, "Hey man, do you know Bobcat Goldthwait?" And it's like, yeah, like you're just like Bobcat. And it's like, well, okay, well, I never watched Bobcat growing up as a kid. That was never like a conscious style. And it would only be 1980s Bobcat because current Bobcat is much different. So no, I wouldn't say like that. And honestly, I feel like the more you do comedy, the less you kind of follow like some of like the newer comics. Like I'll make a point to occasionally watch like a new Netflix special that comes out depending on the person. But in terms of like being excited, like normally I'm at a comedy club just because I'm there. I'm not actively seeking out one or two particular comics. Like if I see one, it's okay, cool, but I'm not going to go out of my way. And the idea of paying for a ticket to see a comedian at this point is like mind boggling, unless it's, somebody of like the Carlin or Pryor level. I guess like by that standard, today it would be like Bill Burr or Jerry Seinfeld, like an absolute master of the craft. And by that, I mean like a cool older white man, just dropping the bits, man, maybe Chappelle, we'll see. He's got some views I don't want to support financially. So I have to go on record and say, I actually never found him funny. So that way I can still get booked. That's how it works.
I hear you. What about you, Charlie?
I would say, and I agree with Joe, that early on you really emulate your idols, and then over time you become your own man on the stage. I think that when I first started writing comedy, I wanted to be a hybrid of Eddie Murphy and Woody Allen. which would be a really sloppy conception process to be their love child comedically. But I always loved the intellectual side of Woody's writing and the stage presence of Eddie Murphy, the almost Elvis-like, maybe Andrew Dice Clay, but with talent of Eddie Murphy's early specials. Well, I guess his only specials because he only made the two of them, Raw and Delirious. But I just loved his confidence. I loved Woody's writing style. And I think Joe hit a good point also that there's comedians that maybe you think that you're trying to be like on stage. And then when other people come up to you and they say, hey, you remind me of XYZ, it's almost never the same person. So I know when I first started doing more comedy in college, I had kind of a Mitch Hedberg-like style, lots of one-liners, lots of wordplay. And I'd always want people to say, hey, you remind me of Mitch Hedberg. But they would come up to me and say, hey, you remind me of Chris Farley. You look very sweaty up there. So not exactly the idol I was always going for. But yeah, I've gotten comparisons to Doug Benson, Judah Friedlander, very talented comedians, Zach Galifianakis. But, I'm aiming for even Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock. I remember reading their books. I remember reading Sign Language, which was Jerry's collection of bits in the late 90s, and Chris Rock's book, Rock This, which was the same thing, his collection of bits when I was in middle school, and thinking, I want to do what Jerry does and what Chris does and find a way to make it Charlie. And in the 20 years of becoming, maybe the most notoriously open mic level amateur comedian that I know, I think I've gotten there. I found who I am, and that's a guy who's right in the middle.
No, absolutely. The next thing I want to know is actually talk about is we actually have a mutual friend. I try to have her on the show. She's actually an upcoming comedian. I think her name is Jillian. You guys are friends with her on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Jillian, her last name? Because I probably know.
Oh, it's something like HAN. She's an Asian upcoming actress.
Okay.
I don't know. She's nice. The reason I asked is because we have a mutual friend, and we kind of got off on a wrong foot. That's my fault because I have poor social skills. So when I talk to someone, I just blur things out. It's like, hey, I have this great idea, and wouldn't it be fun for a show? And it comes off like, I know you didn't mean to kind of say it like that, but it's kind of stupid. Like, for an example, people on my network, like, oh, hey, if you don't like the KeithAndrewNetwork, we have the Human Pyramid Challenge. We have the Dumbo Challenge, and Jumble Book Challenge. And there's so many great things on it. If you don't like any of those, I have some of my favorite wrestlers, the best of Raven, best of Chris Harris, Brett, and, my hero and idol I look up to is Son Goku. So on my networks will have everything. So when I was talking to her, I said, how about we do something fun for an interview? Because I always like to have fun with everyone. I said, hey, why not, at the end, for you guys may or may not know, a lot of people I asked, like, hey, can you take a picture of yourself holding up a sign that says, I support the KeithAndrewNetwork? And I was like, that's fine, but I want to be different. I want to do something that makes it my own, because everyone says, oh, hey, can you take a picture of me too holding up this sign? And that's fine, but I wanted to add my own twist to it. So I came up with the Human Pyramid Challenge. I said, hey, you guys do the pyramid, and while you're in it, you say, we support the KeithAndrewNetwork. Also, Dumbo plays a part in that too, but it's just shake it up. But apparently that kind of rubs people the wrong way. It kind of like, what do you see? Is there some more to it? On the record, there's not more to it. I like that stuff. I'm a loser. I usually don't announce it out there, but I want to make something my own. As you guys are on stage, you don't want to be a carbon copy of each other. So you're going to look and say, how can I make this exactly my own thing? And then I can say, I'm the first to do something like that. That's why I came up with the challenges. Some people like them, some people don't like them, but the hell with them. If you set yourself up for failure, you're going to fail. But as I said, Joe, in the beginning of the show, I cater to everyone, ages from 12 all the way up to, funny enough, I looked at my demographics, 64. So I cater to all ages. So I'm like, okay, if you don't like comedy or my acting skills, then you gotta like this talents. If you don't like this talents, I have something else, and I have something else. But anyway, I didn't mean to go on a real rant. I just want to throw it out there. But the next thing I want to ask you guys is social media. With everything that you guys accomplish in your lives, do you give thanks to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Is it because of these platforms you gave or gotten opportunities to be on TV and get yourself out there? Or do you think if you sneeze the wrong way, it can easily bite you in the ass? And Charlie, I will start with you.
Okay, starting with me. Well, I started doing stand-up in my mid-teens, and social media might have existed on some level, maybe Friendster, maybe MySpace, but it wasn't really a player in the game of how you would get booked, whose shows you would be on. I remember just doing a lot of competitions. I went to college down in UC Riverside, which is a little south of LA. It's the sister school of UCLA. Not the prettier sister, a very ugly sister, a stepsister school, but sister school nonetheless. And social media didn't quite yet have a hold on the comedy community. But now, I mean, Facebook is how we network. You mentioned having a common friend. We all have thousands of Facebook friends, and we're all kind of going for that same laugh. And there's this great competitive edge that I think that we get looking at posts or tweets that other comedians are posting and saying, oh shit, I have a bit about that. I have a joke about that. Mine should be funnier. I need to tighten what I do to compete with everybody else who's kind of in my friend pool. So in that sense, I think that social media has helped a lot of us focus on honing the craft as far as the writing process. Unfortunately, when you're on stage, it's a whole nother beast. When you're on stage, it's a collaborative effort between yourself and the crowd. You're making sweet social love, and that's something that's really social, not a network. That's a magic in the air, a bridge between people who are forced to buy 2 drinks and me, who's up there rambling and throwing out shitty puns and half-assed dance moves. That's where the real magic happens. But I definitely attribute a lot of my comedian friendships to Facebook, because I'll meet comedians in Baltimore or Vegas or Jacksonville who I would have never met in person right away, that I've known through social media, and they help me get booked through just casual conversations. You're saying, hey, how are you doing? Who have you opened for? Oh, I love your joke about The Thing. You do a joke about dating? That's revolutionary. Let's talk about it. So I think that social media has done a lot of great things for comedy. As far as the cancel culture goes right now, that's kind of a growing beast. I think that it may hurt a little bit in the time being, but it will eventually lead to us being better, stronger, faster comedy machines.
No, absolutely. You can't take things too personally. It's kind of like, you have to loosen up and just laugh at stupid things. It's kind of like if you sneeze or fart the wrong way, you're going to offend somebody.
Yeah, well, I always fart the right way. I take a lot of pride in that. I fart out of my asshole 85% of the time.
So you don't do the Adam Sandler burp fart?
No, I've retired that. I also don't do the underarm farts. Don't do any farting with my eardrums. I have no percussion of the fart variety in that area.
What about you, Joe? Same set question for you.
Yeah, about the social media. Yeah, I mean, like I predominantly I think like when I started comedy, seriously, like legit, it was probably in like 2010, 2012. And by then, social media had kind of had its input. And at that point, yeah, it's like it was just kind of like a thing you did. Like I think part of the reason I was able to have like a good turnout, a lot of the shows was promoting through social media. That's how I would get booked on other things, is adding comics on Facebook, meeting them. I myself would also use Facebook to reach out to comics to book them on shows. It's a great tool, as problematic as social media is. And like Yeah, you can get in, like people might be able to find like a tweet you said or something, you posted decades ago at this point and use it against you. But even when like these bad things happen, and it is kind of like a bad, crappy thing that has been happening where, comics are taken out of context. Um, even for like the handful of jobs it's cost, it has provided many opportunities. The fact that we even have viral Vine stars headlining a comedy club just because of their following. Because at the end of the day, like, a comedy club needs to sell drinks. They need to put butts in the seat. You might be a good comic, but if you don't have enough of a pull, you're not going to get booked nearly as much as some Vine star, or I guess now it's TikTok, that has a bunch of followers. So it's good. It's good if there are people that have like the talent to really hone it and create good content. But there's also vapid stuff out there which sucks. But that's mainstream. So what can we do?
No, absolutely, absolutely. But the last question, I know I asked this before, but I'm gonna ask it in a different way. Say, for an example, have you guys been on TV, number one, and for when you're being booked, does your following dictate if you should get booked or not? And this one's for Joe.
I mean, I've done like a handful of public access shows, so I wouldn't say anything, legitimately and mind blowing. But in the end, I would say like, I would dictate what I think like you dictate what your fans will like. So I wouldn't say something like, oh, well, I don't want to do this because my fans expect me to do this and this and this. It's like, if they're your fans, they're going to support the endeavors you go on. And, if you shouldn't try to be stagnant either as a comedian. Like your opinion should change. Your outlook should develop and fluctuate. It's even weirder when you see like these comics that were successful in the 1980s, and here it is in 2021 and they're doing a lot of the same jokes. So it's like, okay, so like 30 plus years, you haven't changed at all as a person. You haven't made any kind of developments or changes or thoughts. Like this stuff is meant, comedy is not like the comedy you say. It can be funny, but it's not like Beethoven's symphony where hundreds of years from now people will listen to it and it will draw upon like the same feelings and emotions that probably an original audience of listening to Beethoven had. Comedy is much different. Comedy is a reflection of your personal experience and the life and what's surrounding you, what's going on in the moment. Like that's what a lot of the George Carlin albums were about, not only his personal opinion but also a reflection of the Reagan era. And Richard Pryor, his material was based on being like growing up as a black man during like this time of intense racial prejudice. And their comedy is still good, but now as an audience of in 2021, and I think we can see that now when they're having these discussions, like we need to talk about this problematic comedian from the 1980s. It's just different. We have a different point of view. The comedy hits differently. It's not that it's not funny, it's just that it's changed and the world has changed, so our perspective of it has changed. The same way a lot of Shakespeare's plays, while they're still being performed now, our interpretation is different. The way we look at it isn't the same way as somebody in the Renaissance would look at a Shakespeare play. They were a lot. Shakespeare was much more crude than I think we give him credit for. And it's just because we don't understand what the fuck he's saying. Like that's really what it comes down to, is we think it's art, but he's really just like kind of like a sassy dude. So I think that's how comedy is going to be too. You also have to look at it as a reflection of the time. It's a time capsule thing. It's not meant to be permanent. It's not meant to say, I don't think what a comedian says should be written in stone, but rather you should look at it like an ice sculpture, where it's like, wow, look at all of this work that can easily be destroyed in a fucking moment. I think that's what it really comes down to. So to answer your question, no, I'll do whatever I want, and my fans will love it anyway. I got them wrapped around my pinky.
And Charlie, what's the last 2 minutes? I'm gonna pass it over to you. How do you, with everything you accomplish, do you think your audience dictates?
Well, I think that they say that you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. And so much of stand-up comedy is just social masturbation. We're making ourselves happy. We're doing what's made us giggle and trying to share that with the world without looking too puby or pervy and voyeuristic. Yeah, I would say I agree with everything that Joe said. Comedy has a completely different shelf life than, say, music. Music can be eternal and immortal, and it's like cheese. It can just sit out there for a long time and still be reheated and reused, and you can make a spicy queso out of it. While stand-up in particular is like milk. Comedy does not age well, and when it's chunky, you got to throw it out. I mean, that's why I really respect guys like Louis C.K. who could look at their craft and say, I'm going to write a new hour every year. Because there have been guys, not to name names, Bill Engvall, who've been doing the same types of jokes for 25, 30 years, not showing any growth. And they're just trying too hard to make an audience happy without worrying about what really makes them fired up about the craft, what makes them want to wake up and write shitty dick jokes and find some way to mold them into something that's pure and lovely and mildly offensive that they can share with the world. And I also like the idea that Shakespeare is a really sassy dude. Maybe it's not much to do about nothing. Maybe there was something in there. Maybe there was much to do about something. And a lot of comedians nowadays, they might be canceled for things that they did a long time ago. I know that the watermelon community has been trying to cancel Gallagher for decades now. And I think that they're finally going to make that happen. The watermelons, they've planted those seeds of discourse. They're going to grow up and eventually wipe Gallagher and all of his wonderful contributions to the art of comedy off the face of the earth. But yeah, all we can do is share who we are up there, share what makes us laugh, and hopefully it makes other people laugh too. If you work too hard to please the audience, you lose sight of yourself. And yourself is always going to be the first and most important to make laugh when you're writing a joke.
I agree with you. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but wrapping up our interview segment, make sure to like and subscribe to HB Gibson, home of the X Zone. Also, it's brought to you by Wife of a Fighter. And if you're in the Impact Wrestling tonight, definitely check it out, 8 o'clock. While that being said, it was an honor and privilege having you guys as a guest, and I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.